Today Switzerland is considered a neutral, peaceful country. Therefore, it is difficult to imagine Switzerland in a war. So, if I asked the question, when was the last time Switzerland was in a war, most people would think of the Napoleonic Wars, which is technically true if you consider only wars in which Switzerland was at war with other nations. The last war fought on Swiss soil was the Sonderbund War. You probably haven't heard about it yet. No worries, if you ask the average Swiss about the Sonderbund War, they probably know there was something there, but couldn't say more about it. But why doesn't anyone remember this war? To find out, we first have to travel to the late 18th century. The Old Swiss Confederation was not a real state, but rather a loose association of independent and sovereign states. In the Old Confederation, people did not have equal rights. The majority of the population was subject to cities, such as Zurich, Basel or Bern. Then came the French Revolution and Napoleon came. When Napoleon invaded Switzerland, many Swiss initially sided with the French because they saw the French as liberators against the tyranny of the upper class. In 1798, Napoleon transformed the old confederation into the Helvetic Republic. Switzerland was now a centralized state for the first time in its history. Aarau became the capital of the Helvetic Republic. However, due to internal conflicts between the cantons, the Helvetic Republic could not last long and ended after 5 years in 1803. After Napoleon's defeat in 1815, and there was nothing he could do, the Congress of Vienna took place with the aim of restoring Europe to its old order. The old order was restored in Switzerland and throughout Europe. In order to continue, we first have to take a closer look at Switzerland. Switzerland is an ethnically divided country, with Swiss German, French Swiss, Italian Swiss and Romansh people. Switzerland is also divided along religious lines. The Catholic cantons tended to be more conservative than Protestants. However, it is important to note that the liberals and conservatives of that time were different and do not necessarily compare to the liberals and conservatives of today. The world was changing quickly back then. The Industrial Revolution started, and new inventions and machines were made. For many people, this development happened too quickly. At the time, the world became more complex and different worldviews spread. The liberals wanted to try again to unite Switzerland under a centralized state and separate religion from the government. The conservatives, on the other hand, wanted all cantons to remain independent and for the Catholic Church to continue to play a dominant role. The liberal cantons began closing monasteries. In Lucerne, a conservative canton, the Jesuits were appointed to higher educational institutions. It was the final straw that broke the camel's back. Crowds of radical liberals gathered in Aargau and marched towards Lucerne twice in 1844 and 1845 to overthrow the Lucerne government, but failed in both attempts. The conservatives were afraid of the liberal cantons and therefore secretly formed an alliance, the Sonderbund. The cantons of Schwyz, Zug, Valais, Fribourg, Luzern, Uri, Nidwalden and Obwalden belonged to the Sonderbund alliance. In 1847, the liberals called on the conservatives to dissolve the alliance, but this was refused. On November 3rd, 1847, the Sonderbund attacked the canton of Ticino, which triggered the Sonderbund War. The Sonderbund was supported by the Catholic conservatives countries of Austria and France. There are people who say that the Sonderbund was a religious war, which isn't true, however, because fate didn't play a big role in the war. St. Gallen, for example, a predominantly Catholic canton, was on the liberal side. The leader of the Sonderbund was Johann Ulrich von Salisoglio, who incidentally himself belonged to the Reformed faith. His opponent was Guillaume Harry Dufour, whom the liberals elected general. Neuchâtel and Appenzell-Innerrhoden were the only cantons that remained neutral in this conflict. The liberals initially focused on the canton of Fribourg, which was cut off from the other cantons of the Sonderbund. The liberal troops surrounded the city of Fribourg, which led to Freiburg's surrender on November the 11th, followed by Canton Lucerne on November 23rd. Then all the cantons of the Sonderbund surrendered one after the other. The war ended with fewer than 200 soldiers killed. But what happened there, and what about Austria and France? At this point, Austria and France were conservative Catholic powers and wanted to help the Swiss conservatives. Although Austria provided some money and ammunition, they argued with France over exactly what to do. The British finally intervened and banned both major powers from interfering in Switzerland, because as a liberal country, they preferred the liberals in Switzerland, and they liked the idea of driving the Jesuits out of Switzerland. France held back because it itself had problems with radical liberals. Austria also had many problems with many nationalist movements within its own country. The following year there would be a major revolution in Austria and throughout Europe, but that is another story. The war lasted less than a month. Now let's talk about the man who prevented a terrible bloody war. Dufour said from the beginning that the war should be as bloodless as possible. When Dufour surrounded the city of Freiburg, he refrained from shooting instead, arranging a meeting with the Fribourg authorities and successfully appealing to their reason. Afterwards, some cantons even capitulated voluntarily. Dufour wanted to work with the conservatives rather than triumph over them. Dufour did not want to punish the conservatives harshly for the war. The consequences. The cantons of the Sonderbund had to pay war reparations. The Jesuit order was banned from Switzerland. However, the Jesuit ban was lifted in the year 1973. The Swiss constitution was written in the year 1848. Technically, 1848 is the birth year of modern Switzerland. Switzerland was united with one government, but the cantons retained a lot of autonomy and were allowed to continue to have their own government. The Swiss canton system is a consequence of the Sonderbund War. In the end, the conservatives and the liberals both got what they wanted by making compromises. Dufour can be considered the father of modern Switzerland, and ironically, most Swiss people don't remember him. However, all Swiss people have heard his name before, as the highest mountain in Switzerland was named after him, the so-called Dufourspitz.